Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start off just with the front squat, like as is. Whether you want it, whatever you do for warm up, or we can jump right in wherever.
Sounds good.
I find that sometimes just doing the naked bar, I need a little bit of like balance and a little bit more load. But see how it suits you.
This might be slightly high. Let's maybe move this down. Wait, front squat. I guess normally I'd be doing the 8 second or 7-8 seconds down.
Mm-hmm.
As you might imagine, I'm kind of leaning forward, so when the weight gets heavier, it's hard to keep it.
Yeah, the first thing that I noted was like if there's as soon as you get into like moderate load, that form is not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, totally.
My other thought simultaneously was like, damn, your squat looks really good form wise, but essentially it has to do with how you're racking it actually.
Okay. And so then like I've thought like, okay, if I try to like keep it higher in some way and like be more vertical, can I do that? But then I can just like barely go down.
Right. Yep.
So it kind of feels like the front squat is not very helpful for me.
Got it.
If I can, if I'm only doing like this.
Diminishing returns on a lot of effort. So yeah, if you rack it there, go up a little bit. Yeah, so when we look at your rack, right, and you do more of the traditional.
I'm open to switching. I mean, I've tried this. I think I've tried straight once.
Yeah, a couple suggestions. So if you're going to do this one, then the thing that is going to necessitate is that you're going to need to get mobility, or maybe you already have it, but your positioning of your humerus needs to be 90 degrees to your torso, right? And right now it's here, and so this positioning is gonna pull you forward because of where the load is relative to your center of mass of your spine, and that's why you feel like you're there.
Yeah.
So options, right? I'm preferential for this one. I just find that I can load up as heavy as I can until the limiting restraint is my leg strength. It does take a little bit of getting used to, but just by having your arms in this position, the deltoid usually has a decent amount of padding to protect the bony prominences. I also had a bike accident, which my clavicle sticks out, so it's like a really nice rack. So I have that going for me. But then the other one is, I don't know if you've ever seen like those lifting straps, where people will actually put it over and then like actually hold on the straps like that. Is another consideration.
Okay.
Tertiary option would be Smith machine, where you don't really have to worry about it as much. You can kind of just get up under there, and the thing's not going to fall forward as much as it otherwise would if it's free floating. Okay. Would be my initial reaction. So I would say in this instance, let's try this one, and then I know you lowered these. My recommendation, really across the board, is that you set these at the height of your iliac crest. So it's usually a much higher than people typically do, unless you really want to get into like deep positions. But typically that would be what would be recommended just from a safety standpoint. And I think it allows you to safely fail, because hopefully there are sets, or be it on a given day or across training sessions, where you are going to a complete failure state.
I like never fail on squats.
Oh,
but I think that's partly because I don't want to drop the bar.
got it.
But it sounds like maybe I should be.
Yep. And it's interesting. What was another analogy? But sometimes, I guess the thing that comes to mind is like X Games athletes, right? They don't really have a fear of like eating it because they practice eating it, right?
Sure.
And it's the same thing with like the squat. Is like there's or it can be, especially when you're under load. Like the brain knows that like this is heavy and I may not be able to control it, but it may also allow you to maintain form and go to form failure or muscular failure with good form without having to compromise form just to finish the lift.
Okay.
But one thing at a time. Let's try the high position.
I think I'm out. I'm usually doing this without shoes too, but I know we don't have weight right now. But I think with weight, this would still be pretty forward.
Mm-hmm. But the angle of your humerus relative to your torso is much better here. So you would otherwise be more successful with that.
Uh-huh.
Is it comfortable resting on you?
I mean, it kind of feels like it's going in my
throat
a little bit, but I don't think there's a way around that. It's not like too much.
Right. Yeah. So I would. Are you able to push it out any further away from your throat?
Like that?
Like if I was to adjust it, I'd like move it just a little bit forward on your delt. Yep.
Like that?
Yeah. Just so it doesn't cut off the airway.
I think it just feels like it's going to roll forward more at that position.
Okay.
So then I feel like I don't want to lean forward. Is this just like a mobility constraint for me, probably? My ankles?
Yeah, so that's the other consideration. I don't know if it's a mobility issue because, we've tested your ankle mobility and it's been okay. It's been sufficient. What I suspect is that it has to do...
I thought it was limited.
Oh. Was it? I thought that I have to check the numbers.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's possible that... I don't think it's limited enough for this to be a limiting factor.
Okay.
Because, like, if you were to just do a back squat, just for a second. I think it has to do with where the load sits relative to your center of mass and trying to coordinate a balanced position. You're right. Maybe it is an ankle thing.
I mean, if I turn my feet out more, that helps a bit.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead and rack. So I will say one theory, and maybe I've expressed this to you before, is like living with your heels on the ground for the majority of your life is good. Uh-huh. But when you train, I endorse like having a little bit of a heel lift.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think at one point you said like, well, you could try putting a 2.5 or 5 pound weight under your heels.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the next play.
Okay.
Even if it's not an ankle mobility issue, oftentimes that helps to solve what is the movement puzzle of trying to coordinate your center of mass under your base of support, so you don't feel so constrained as you go down, and you don't feel like you're going to fall forward as much, because it allows you to sit back into it and drop into it a little bit more. So like if we took away the constraint of the bar just for a second and added a different constraint, like a heavier load.
Like a goblet or something?
Yeah, similar to a goblet, but maybe we up the ante a little bit as far as so that you have comparable weight. Okay, so you like interlace them like this.
Okay.
And again, that takes away this necessity, because it can kind of rest comfortably in the shoulder girdle, and then you can squat down into it, pause, and then come back up, and just let's see what the constraints look like, and whether it mimics the same challenges that you face with the bar.
So going like that?
Yeah.
Move my watch, it's sitting on it. I've never done that before. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and let the torso go forward just a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, you definitely collapse through the arches. The significance of that is that it tells me that you're likely getting some of your ankle mobility through your midfoot. But the depth looks really good. And it looks better than with the bar, no?
Yeah.
Does it feel better than that? Yeah.
Well, it feels like I can just go farther down, you know?
Nice. Yeah. So, again, I think it has to, yes, maybe there's an element of the ankle, but it also has to do with that trying to balance the center of mass when your spine is locked out into an extended state.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, go ahead.
Was I butt winking there? I was trying to.
No, I did not see a butt wink.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought you did really well with the depth.
So it's more like upper thoracic.
I think it's
it's
like a combination of. So, I mean, when your spine is not locked out here, then you have additional degrees of freedom, such that you can keep your base of your center of mass under your base of support and not feel like you're falling forward or backwards. But when I'm here, everything's tensioned, right? And immediately what happens, and you can kind of see it on me, if I was to go like this, I'm going to be anterior pelvic tilted.
Yeah.
It's going to make it really difficult for me to like get into any form of like deep squat because of that essentially open scissors position of my rib cage and my pelvis.
Okay.
Can we try it with heels elevated and just see what that looks like?
Yeah.
Just out of comfort, you may need shoes, but your choice.
Oh, wait. Right.
And elbows just a little bit higher if you can. Yep, boom, that's it.
I mean, that was a little below parallel.
That was deep. No, that was good. Yep.
This would still probably be a little hard if I actually had weight on. Like if I had 115 or something total.
Mhm.
But probably more possible.
Yeah. And then if we trade for a moment, so, and I think if you get the opportunity to look back at the video, so your first movement is like knees go forward. And I'm exaggerating just for the purposes of example, right? But I would expect your bum to at least follow that motion, right? So so that they almost go in sequence where knees go forward, hips go back, such that you're not getting this more upright position as much. Not to suggest that you want to be bent over, but I think you're, and perhaps it's because what you feel upstairs with the bar and trying to balance that. But I would say that sitting your butt back into it and being more on your heels may allow for like a more efficient squat.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like the bar's not quite even on me up above, but not too far.
I mean, that looks pretty good. I don't know, how does it feel for you?
Yeah, it feels better. I think I did notice that recently. It's like, oh, it feels like I'm doing this first rather than this. Like, what's the right ratio there?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I mean, here's the thing: it's like there's no right or wrong. It's a continuum, and I would suggest that on one training day, maybe you do more the first version that you did, but it doesn't. I think it's harder to sequence the pattern with that.
Sure.
The significance, what it means from a training effect, right, is like when you go more knee dominant, it's going to be a little bit more quad, a little bit more like in the thigh muscle, versus when I sit my butt back, that's going to be a little bit more glute, and it's going to be like a proportion as to which one you're biasing with that. For me, I usually my recommendation would be slight 30 degrees forward with the torso, not more than what would be or comparable to your tibial angle, right? If you go more than 45 degrees, they show that you have a little bit more strain on the low back. But having the ability, they call it movement variability, to be able to squat in multiple different manners, shows an inept means of being a good squatter, if you will, right? The same example would go for like a basketball player, right? Steph Curry can shoot 100 different ways, but the result is the same. Which, it's just a means of additional competency within the movement pattern itself. The last thing I wanted to try with the stool, just to emphasize that.
Try to sit onto it.
You just come back and tap it.
Yeah.
And then I would also say, if we can, there's two things that I do with a band. One is like the push out, and the other is actually a little bit of a pull in. Not estranged from kind of what we've been working on with the single leg version, where you're doing more your mobility work.
Okay. And so you're saying pushing out when I'm going down and then pulling in when I'm coming up?
Two separate training stimuli.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So try a couple with the stool where you're just kind of reaching back, trying to kiss it.
Yeah. too much on the heels.
Yes, sir.
I should have my shirt tucked in right now, but I wonder, it almost feels like maybe there's a little bit of like side to side movement when I'm going down.
Yeah, I was looking for that, particularly at the gluteal fold, as far as like one buttock being lower than the other, which would be a indicator of, like, again, hip capsule restriction, if you will. I didn't see that. So the other consideration that would, well, actually, I have several thoughts. So one is actually, we'll stick with the band for the moment. All right, so that looked really good. There may be some deviation from side to side. To your previous comment about, and we'll summarize all the things that we talked about, but to your comment about, like, if I had 115 on the bar, this would be really difficult. So what I have personally found is, like, doing a couple weeks worth of, like, that slow duration, like that 8-second, 1 second pause, and then coming out of it, is that I found myself to be, everything besides my legs got a lot more comfortable holding the bar in that position, allowing me then for the rate limiter to be my leg strength and allowing me to go up in weight more so than when I could before that. And so it could be a means of, like, where the bar is resting, and that doesn't matter how strong you get, that may eventually be the ceiling. From watching you, I don't think that would be a bottleneck down the road if it becomes that. But I think that you get a lot more comfortable with holding more weight in that position, spending more time not only on the descent, but also even spending time at the bottom. Like, if you dropped into it, hold there for X amount of seconds and then coming back up. There's a great strength coach named Dan John. I don't know if you've heard of him. Here, I'm going to have you throw that around your knees. And he's talked about that the front squat is, he holds it in high regard because it is one of the most full body exercises that you can be doing, right? I think your back squat doesn't have the same demands on, like, the erector spinae and the lats and everything from in the upper body that does the front squat. Yeah. And I totally feel that. Like, the day after, nothing that I do in my training gets my erector spinae like my front squat.
In the triphasic work, I found I'm usually just, like, holding for 8 seconds, or, like, let's say descending for 8 seconds rather than the 7-1-2-1, I think. And I find that, like, when I'm near the end, it's, like, sometimes hard to know, am I still descending or am I just kind of, like, holding there for a half second or second? Do you think I should be more intentional in, like, okay, I'm going to do, like, go down for 7 and then just, like, hold for 1 or 2 seconds?
I have found that meaningful stall is really important.
Okay.
Even if you came down at 6 seconds, right, and you still do your 8. And one reason why is because it takes out that elastic recoil that honestly, sometimes you want that for some training purposes. And that would be like a different phase of the triphasic.
Yeah.
Versus in this one, it's really more like stall out, allow the muscle system to really force that or produce that force rather than having the elastic recoil of the myofascial and or the connective tissue.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would say yes.
Okay. Then I think maybe to train that better, maybe I'll, like, mentally think about doing this for, like, 6 or 7 seconds and then hold for 1 to 2. So I can, like, get that rhythm.
Yeah.
Okay. And then it reminds me, on the deadlift, the 7 seconds is on the way up, right?
It would be on the descent.
Okay.
Yep. The deadlift, I would strongly encourage just tapering the loads a little bit. Maybe you already are doing that, but I mean, there's just a lot of 7 seconds of long descent for deadlifts. Yeah.
I've been doing it incorrectly in that it's 7 seconds up. So I'll have to try it down.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested to see what it looks like. Yeah, but fair enough. Because I know, like, 3 seconds halfway down, I'm like, oh my gosh, my hamstrings are screaming, even just with the bar.
Nice.
That's my own limitation. Yeah. Okay, and then just a couple cues with the band. So you can see that you have 4 squares underneath you, which are the panels of the floor.
Mm-hmm.
In my own psychology, in my mind, I'm thinking of those 4 plates being quadrants of like force plates. And what I'm trying to do, if I'm emphasizing my left side or my right side, is I'm trying to be in the posterior right or left quadrant as I push out into the band. For me, I tend to deviate onto my right. And so I try and spend as much time in my left posterior hip and on that left heel as I possibly can when I'm doing my front squats with the band.
Okay.
Because my left hip restriction is worse than your right hip restriction that I'm working on. Yeah.
Okay, so for me, it would probably be into my right. So I'm kind of, if I'm exaggerating it, it's like...
Yeah, so it's less of an obliquity and more about pressure displacement on the floor. So, like, if there was a third-party observer, they wouldn't really be able to tell what you're working on necessarily.
I was trying to there. Did it? I guess you said you can't tell.
I could tell with that, yeah, because there was a slight deviation. But I would still encourage you to come back.
Oh, yeah.
And then stall at the bottom for your 1 to 2 as you drive out into the band. Yep. Keep pushing out. So right knee out. Yep. And then posterior.
Well, that's hard.
The funny thing is your mandible is going with your pelvis. It's not uncommon, but yeah, your jawline was going right.
That's funny. This is rolling too forward. How did those look?
Yeah, they look really good.
I felt like I was having to remember to sit back.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised, right? You're still in more of that cognitive phase for this one cue, right? Now we're also like I'm bringing your attention to other things, right?
Yeah.
And so that's only normal. But I think that the more repetitions you do it, the more that you're going to feel, am I here or am I there?
Yeah.
With the balance between the displacement of the knee and the hip.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure you know this, but being forward, I think it like kind of puts more ITB on strain too.
Yeah. Yep. I hear that. For sure. And then, do you mind, before we deviate from what we just did,
yeah,
same stimulus, but try it with the, with the kettlebells. Yep.
Should I have the stool, or do you want to?
I moved it because I thought you were going to probably go a lot lower,
okay.
but we'll see. push out, drive, hips, 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 hips.
Felt like my back was.
Yeah. I was surprised at that. Yep. Keep breathing. And then can you drive the band apart? Huh.
Should I keep going?
One more.
Okay.
And can you get here? Can you get like really wide with your hips?
On the descent?
Yeah. And certainly at the bottom. Yep. Keep going with that.
What do you think?
Yeah, I thought it looked a lot more effortful than I was expecting it to.
Yeah.
Just because like when you had done it, earlier in the session, it seemed like you looked more comfortable.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was the addition of the band or the emphasis on putting it posterior in that.
I think it was more the posterior.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I stick by what I would say is like, and it doesn't have to always be right-sided. I mean, you can certainly do it left-sided as well. But given the emphasis that we've been working on has been a little bit more trying to get into that posterior right quadrant.
Yeah. So when you were saying push your hips out as you're going down, was that for both with a little more emphasis on the right? Or did you want just the right?
No, I would say both.
Okay.
Yep, that's good. And then...
would you say that's just for training with the band, or like in general, I should be trying to...
I would say like in general.
Okay.
Yep. And then if you were to unloaded, right, and whether you want to do it on the vertical bar or even on the safety there, but like come down into it, have hands forward, push out, and you don't have to be below parallel, and just be able to breathe in this position. Can I see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, come up a little bit higher and then push band out a little bit.
Interestingly, it feels a little easier to push out with my left right now. Might just be the tightness or restriction in the right.
Yeah. And then, you can just watch your head coming up, but maybe one more there. Yeah, I mean, that looks really good.
Good I think you were more forward, weren't
symmetry. You? I was. Yep, I was. There you go.
As funny as it sounds, I feel like if I was to even just do that, like I could swap that in for some other exercise in the training plan sometimes.
You could. For me, where does that fit into my routine? Is either as a dynamic warm up.
Okay.
Or, well, actually, there's 3 points. Dynamic warm up. Every other time I squat outside of my training. Right. So if I'm getting down, if I have to like get something out of the cupboard, or for instance, I have one of those for my fridge. My freezer's down. And so every night I sit like that and try and get into my bottom position as I get the things out of the freezer and just try and cycle breaths as I get up and out of it. And then the third time is every time I lift or take a plate, is I use that as an opportunity to like get in and out of that bottom position with a little bit of assist from the hands either being fully out, which acts as a counterbalance, and or even like a little bit of a gripping. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's really good value in breathing in the bottom position of what you want to achieve, because usually then the motor cortex can, if you can give it the dots, it can connect them.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Rather than just rather than just doing that as its own separate exercise.
Sure. Okay.
Especially because you've already gotten a really long library of exercise options.
Sure.
I felt like there was one other thing that I wanted to
I'm
say.
pretty much just trying to follow the like triphasic plan. Do you think I should be switching
No, I think
specific exercises in and out more?
I think when it comes to your squat in particular with that, the short answer is no.
Okay.
The longer answer is like, I think that there's value in having variation within your squat, right? And that's a little bit of what we're doing today, but what I'm not actually expressing, right? It's like, so on one week you're doing a back squat, next week you're doing your front squat, and you're alternating. But then within the options of your front squat, right, there's the bar with the band, there's the Smith machine, right?
Yeah.
Another good drill that one of my buddies had me do, and I actually really liked it, was like take a inverted dumbbell and you go 50% of body weight, and you do as many reps as you can. I think he said you're supposed to be able to do 25, and I was like, damn. But it's not, again, where the majority of the fitness industry is putting emphasis on like what is the weight and what is this exercise supposed to be training, such as like it should be a leg day. When I go to my front squat, I'm like, no, I'm training this movement pattern, right? Irrespective of whether my legs are the rate limiter, I'm going to deliberately get into it. I'm going to spend time in that position, and then I'm going to come up. And whether the training stimulus on that given day, be it my leg or be it like my upper body and my erector spinae, as I was mentioning, or my shoulder girdle, so be it, right? The rate limiter will be the constraint, but it will also be the thing that gets the most adaptation on that given day. And that was, for me, that was like kind of an important mind shift, not only in my squat, but across my training.
Okay. Nice.
Here's one other thing. The last thing is the reciprocal band pull, where you would pull it in versus pushing out. Okay. And if are you still good to keep going through the squat? I know you squatted a lot already. Right. So why don't you slip that band off?
Okay.
I had a patient yesterday. He came, I'm seeing him for he actually had a motor vehicle accident, so we're working on some of the hematoma and fractures that he has in his lower body. But he's recently got back into sparring and hitting a bag, and did something to his right shoulder and hit an MRI of his shoulder. He's like, Mike, I need you to look at my MRI, and then I need you to give me a 5-minute explanation and nothing more. I was like, well, you want to talk about the anatomy of the, he goes, do you think it's like a bone on bone? Do you think it's tendon? And I'm like, oh, let me show you the anatomy. He's like, whoa, I know you too well. I need to be a little bit more precise, rather than verbose. Yeah.
That's funny.
Okay. This may preclude a little bit of our camera, but I think it will be okay for the moment. Let's see. So, traditionally,
Maybe we can move it too.
oh yeah, that's maybe move it to the other side.
Okay.
or even post. Maybe come to the back. Try that. Okay, so the idea here is that we're trying to get a little bit more medial quad and adductor activation during our squat. So why would that be important?
Medial quad is middle?
It's like more inner? Like, yeah, it's more inner. And so traditionally, even if you look at your quad development, right? So you have like your vastus lateralis out here, and then you have your vastus medialis. And even in my thigh, right, I have some essentially convexity here and concavity here, right? So I should do my diligence to try and fill that out so it's more convex and convex, right? But if we're having tension on the outside, and we're having symptoms here, continuing to push out and to activate the posterior lateral hip could continue to predispose that. Versus the idea is if we have a restraint pulling us out, then I'm going to be like, oh, let me gently pull in.
Yeah.
And that's going to reciprocally just create a little bit more tension in my adductors. Reflexively, that will relax or reduce the amount of tension out here.
Yeah.
It's like this. So when someone checks your reflex of your patella, for instance, you get a fast contraction, non-volitional of your quad, but you also get a simultaneous relaxation of the hamstring. And so working within like the reflexes of the agonist and the antagonist muscle groups is the rationale here. So if you were to actually pull the box, 6 inches that way.
Go on more than that?
Just a little bit. Yep. Yeah, there you go. Yep. Yeah, and I still stick by what I said a moment ago. When you go down, right, you still want to have like center of knee joint over ankle joint, but there's going to be a little bit more of a pull in. And then as I drive up, it's going to be a little bit more of this, I'm resisting the band a little bit more than what I would be if it was essentially on the out, if the band was trying to drive me in. I'll demonstrate that once more. All right, so I come down, a little bit of activation there, and that really helps me to like load a little bit more through that right leg. And this is one of the methods that I've used on my left leg to try and contribute to the, the strength deficits that I have from side to side.
Show me with the bar or just squat without?
Yeah, just give it a feel first.
Okay. Should I be going out more, you think?
No, that looks pretty good.
Okay.
How does the resistance feel for you?
Interesting that it feels like it gets my glute more on the way up.
It should.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it does feel like when I'm down here, it's like, kind of pulling it out a little bit. Which is probably good too.
And then the amount of tension?
I don't know. Seems good.
Okay. I'm just going to give it a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Try a back squat actually first.
Okay. Like with the bar?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, and then try 2, maybe 3 more, but go eyes closed.
Okay. That felt weird.
Yeah.
Never done that before.
Yeah, the sensory deprivation squat is what I call it.
I was trying to intentionally get my hips back a little more that time.
Nice.
That was very uneven at the top there.
Very good. It was. Yep. Mm-hmm. But you pick up on the subtleties and the asymmetries much more effectively when your eyes are closed. And usually what I also have people do, it's fine because it's silent in here, but even like auditory cues will orient you a little bit more. But when it's like, you have like noise canceling headphones and then eyes closed, it's like, where am I in space? And like, I use it a lot for like post ACL where people will look good with their eyes open. And I'm like, you're hiding something. And then you go sensory deprivation and they're like, whoop, they like totally offload the involved limb.
I mean, I felt like I was doing that a little bit on the way down too, or at least going side to side.
Yep. But you sorted it, right? You
tried, yeah. I'll try a little more.
And then keep the weight in the heels.
I think that was better, right?
It was. Yep. Stall at the bottom for a second, weight in the heels, and then drive through that right leg against the band as you come up. Nice. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Hell yeah, Grant. Great.
Do you think it's worth practicing that occasionally too?
For sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And I know it's, what we're doing a little bit of is like random practice, which is like really good for motor learning, but it also, because it's the randomness of it, it doesn't allow for like the consistent structure that we are so used to. Simultaneously to that, it can also, like our efficacy, if we were to like rate ourselves after random practice of how good we are at a skill, we'd rate ourselves lower than if we did like block practice at the same thing over and over again. But that's really just the illusion of learning, right? Is like if I take 100 free throws, you ask me how am I at free throws or at basketball shooting per se, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm really good. Versus if you had me shoot at multiple different locations on the court, 100 different locations, and you ask me how am I at shooting, I'd be like, But then if you have a retention test like a week later, the person who has all that experience and that variability actually like if we were to shoot from a different spot on the floor, say you move that person from the free throw like a foot forward or a foot back, then the person with the variable practice is much more competent and much more successful at the basketball shooting.
So maybe the person only doing free throws would be better at free throws, but if you take them out of that, then they're not going to be as good.
To some extent, that's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
that is accurate. Yeah, I think that's what the data would otherwise show.
Yeah. Which, I mean, life is not one free throw line.
Very good. Yeah. There's specificity in certain things where it's just like rogue practice. But then, yeah, it's really interesting. I'm reading this one book right now. It's called Peak. I don't know if you've heard of it. But yeah, it's they're talking all about purposeful and deliberate practice and how the individuals within a domain, particularly in this case, the example that they gave, ironically, is medicine, is like doctors 5 and 10 years out are worse at their job than the resident that is like 3 years out, because they plateau and then they don't have that deliberate, constant reflection, and so then they actually start to decline because the inevitable of just practicing doesn't get you better. It's like the deliberate nature of practice, as well as the purposefulness of making it very specific and intentional.
Interesting.
Yeah. Anyways, a little bit of a tangent, but in the way that it applies to what we're doing today is like, into your question, should I be having my eyes closed at times? Yeah, I'll throw it in randomly into my training and be like, what, really as a litmus test of where I'm at. Oftentimes I need to like film it when I do it. Otherwise, I mean, you can go through the experience, as you already mentioned, was like, that was like interesting without even like visually seeing yourself. But I think that if you can squat eyes closed in a sensory deprivated state, that you're going to be much more successful when you have the visual system on board and all sensory returned.
Okay.
So in summary of the front squat, I would say if we just went through what we talked about. So I'd like you here versus like with that, specifically because you're able to get your humerus more perpendicular. I would suggest having a variety of different front squats, everything from the bar to potentially the Smith machine to potentially even like dual kettlebell or inverted dumbbell. When it comes to like, I think for the moment at least, having heels elevated is good. Interleaved within not only your training but within your life, being deliberate about getting down into a deep position, cycling a couple breaths there, however long, be it 30 seconds to a minute being the longest duration of time, but even just the interleaving that and having that randomly sprinkled and like taking almost like a litmus test of like, where is my squat capacity at today, can be really quite informative. And then when we're talking about trying to get into that posterior right hip, we gave kind of 3 cues. One was like the analogy of the 4 plates, like force plates, that is. And I'm trying to be posterior and I'm trying to be off to that side slightly. But that's more pressure based rather than like deviation based of the pelvis. Yeah. And then we also had the inputs of the bands. One was like being a little bit more broad based. And then the other one was like the reciprocal means of actually activating that adductor, where I was actually really pleased that you felt it more in your glute on that side. And I have a colleague who speaks about this. She's also PRI based, and she talks about how consistently the lateral quad people are using it as their hip abductor because of its attachment. Or attachment point, and such that when you actually get them to adduct a little bit, the quad can act like the quad and the glute can act like and function as the glute, and people feel their glute more and be like, oh, that's interesting. Would be like the summary of like our squat university. That's good.
Awesome.
Other thoughts or questions?
When thinking about adding weight to doing the squats and these different varieties, I assume it's better to go for form and like getting, let's say, all 3 sets of 8 in, rather than like, I don't know, being able to get 1.5 sets or 2.5 sets in. Is that right?
I'm sorry, I don't fully understand.
If
So I think I understand. Can I just voice it back to you?
Sure.
You can confirm, right? So, focusing more on the form rather than on the volume, right? So, like, if I could only do like 1.5 to 2 sets with really good form, that would be maybe superior to doing 3 sets of 8 with questionable form.
Yeah, and I think maybe the part nuance there is it better to decrease the weight so that I could get the full form and full sets and reps?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And, it doesn't always have to be, it doesn't have to be 3 sets of 8 at the same weight. So feel free to fluctuate it. Not only, like, so there are some times where I'm like, there's a weight that's really challenging for me to do it with proper form for like 8 to 10 reps. Instead of going down, I bolster the weight by like 5 to 10 pounds and maybe I get 3 or 4 and I do that for 2 sets. And then I go back to the weight the lower weight that I was struggling with initially. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is easier now. Because you get like this excitation, potentiation within this the neuromuscular system and the nervous system that then allows you to be more successful with the weight that was otherwise you were struggling with.
Okay.
So it can fluctuate in both regards, going down or slightly above.
Got it. And when you talked about setting the safety bars at the iliac crest, I just haven't tried that before, but are they too high if when you're squatting they touch the safety bars?
I would say it depends.
Okay.
Right? So like if they're touching it, if they're this high and you touch it, it's too high. But usually what I want to get is maybe hovering over an inch or so. But if I click, that's okay. But I'm not trying to touch it each time.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to try 1 set to failure and just see what that feels like?
Sure. Should I have this or without?
No, I'll leave it up to you. Any one of the variations that we did today.
Okay.
Where's your iliac crest at? Pretty good. All right, F.
Dang, that is high.
I know. It's much higher than what you would otherwise expect.
Yeah, wow. Okay.
You want front or back squat?
Let's do front since we've been focusing on that.
Love that.
I might feel faster, but...
You want a 95?
Let's do 115. You said 1 set to failure, right?
Just 1.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
This is interesting. I literally have not done this in years. And before, it's only by accident.
What? That's funny. All right. So we'll just get our tempo.
Yeah, thanks.
And by failure, we're talking form failure, right? So just go hopefully you don't have to sacrifice the form and you find your muscular failure within that.
Right. Okay. So I guess in theory that could have been, it should mean dropping the weight, right? Because if I can make it up to the top, I could probably at least make it part way down.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right. New experience here.
You got it. It's normal to feel a little apprehension, a little arousal. It's only there for performance-based. It's the biological system getting ready. Good. Stall for a second, and then up. Hell yeah, Grant. Good. Sit butt back. Yep. Stay diligent on the form. Butt back. Find that stool. Remain diligent with the form. Torso forward, butt back. Less knee. Yes, just come down and hold this one. No. Good form. Butt back. Okay. Done. Yep.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So interesting. Like as we watch that transpire, right? Your last 2 or 3 were much different form than what you started with.
Okay.
Right? So but you were still able to complete the rep. And so
As in I'm not going as far back.
Yeah, you're very, and yeah, I don't know if we captured it from the back, but definitely from the side. You were like, your last one, you were like this, and you're really straining. So my expectation would have been that you would have gone, if you had remained, you probably wouldn't have gotten it up if you had remained in the proper form.
Yeah.
And you would have failed earlier, but you would have failed at the bottom versus like having to drop it like that.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, interestingly, as you say that, a couple days ago when I was, I think back squat was part of it, and I felt myself feeling like the last rep or two that I could not go as far down and felt like a little more forward, which is probably the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
And so even the emphasis becomes on the form rather than on the success of the lift.
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, success is actually failing under good form rather than whether you get the bar to the top or not.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think the more that you raise the safeties, you'll feel more comfortable remaining stat with your form.
Yeah. It didn't drop very far.
No, that was good. Yeah. And oftentimes, what I find,
I previously had to sit down here, would have dropped a foot.
That would have been a problem. Yeah. Yep.
Is it iliac crest for box squat too?
It is.
Okay.
Yep. The one time point that I will deviate from that would be for like a lunge or a reverse. Because just sometimes I bump them. I bump the weights on the safety, so then I'll lower it.
I'm usually doing dumbbell lunge, but I guess I could be doing barbell too.
Yeah, I mix it up.
Okay.
I usually actually go embarrassingly light just because I don't do it a lot. Like the next day, I'm just like tore up in my high hamstring and my buttock, and yeah. And there have been times where I've gotten a really big Charlie horse. Where it's like I'm like down at the bottom, like whoa. So I'm like, if I haven't done it in a couple of weeks, I'll go like either bar or like tens on each side, and just like start to expose, just prep my tissues, be like, guess what's coming, rather than like going too high, too quickly. Yeah.
For going to failure, is that something that like basically every time I'm doing it, I should be willing to go to failure?
Yeah, so there's a lot of debate on this. So let's see if I can't summarize the science. So science would suggest if you're at 80%, maybe even 75% of your 1 rep max or higher, going to absolute failure is not as necessary as if you were using a much lighter load. And if you're going for, I don't know, 25 or 30 reps or a weight that would allow you to do that.
In total set?
In a total set.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Then you need to, it's important for you to go as close to failure or to absolute failure as you need to if you're using a much lighter sub-maximal load.
Okay. Which, I mean, it's always going to be the case because I'm doing let's say 3 sets of 8 or 4 sets of 10 or something, right?
Right, but that whatever weight that you're doing, so you're right, it's going to be sub-maximal, but so I think
I'd have to be doing reps of 3 or something to get that high, right? 75% of max.
No, 70. It should be usually 10 reps is at 70%, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I have to look back at the 1RM chart, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Oh, okay.
So you training to 1 or 2 reps in reserve seems to suggest in those higher loads that you're going to get a comparable training stimulus. And some people have also suggested that one reason for training a set to failure is so neurologically exhausting that it can compromise the intensity of the subsequent lifts, either within that workout or depending how quickly your turnover is to your next workout.
Yeah.
Despite that science, I consistently find a lot of value in trying to train to failure. So for me, on my last set,
frankly, I don't know what failure is for most things.
Mm-hmm. Right, and so I would suggest that one of the reasons why I like doing it is because I feel like I can predict where, and again, you can talk about the central governor theory of your brain actually can probably shut us down prior to what our true maximal is. And because of that, I'm okay with going to failure. Sure. Because there are times where
have a little more.
Yeah, you probably have a little bit more as is. But there'll be times where I'm I don't know if I'm going to get this next rep up. So I will go halfway down and then try and push back up. And it will be like a quasi-isometric as I continue to set into it. And then I'm done. Yeah. And so I have the belief that there is always a little bit more in the tank than we allow ourselves to believe. And so, yes, is it exhausting to get multiple sets to that? Yes. Is it absolutely necessary for tissue adaptation when we're training at 75% or higher? No.
And going to failure, should it just be on the final set, or could it be even first set? Go to failure.
Yeah. That's interesting. My initial reaction is no. Your first couple sets should be sub-maximal. You should be priming the system.
Yeah.
Tapping into
those.
I
kind of assumed.
Yeah, neuromuscular priming, and even psychological and emotional priming, where it takes us a little bit of time to light up those circuits.
Yeah.
Be able to go full board.
Yeah.
I mean, there are certainly days and certainly people that can just they just function at a really high RPM and they're ready to sprint at any moment, right? Good on them. But it's hard to go from, I just think that human biology usually is much more conducive to a gradual ramp up than any static change of going from 0 to 100.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Cool.
But yeah, I would say consistently I'm trying to take multiple sets to failure in a given, if I was going to, at least half of them is my own training.
Okay.
But the science would suggest that you don't need to.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah, man. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Sorry we went over there.
That's fine. I lost track of time.